they say you see something, say something, and I did, and they fired me for it. So I think it's important to protect teachers because we've got to get them to start feeling comfortable with speaking out about what's going on.
A lot of you guys who watch this regularly recognize that we have some extremely serious problems in our public education system. Well, today I'm incredibly honored and very pleased to have with us Jennifer McWilliams. She was a public school teacher in the state of Indiana. She leads the Purple for Parents chapter up there. And she faced some really extreme retaliation from the school administration over her decision to speak out on behalf of children, on behalf of parents, against some of the things that were going on in the school district. Jennifer, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
Oh, my pleasure. So, Jennifer, you and I first talked some months ago. I wrote a brief story about what happened, but for the viewers who maybe aren't familiar with your story, give us a little bit of background on what led to the blow up with the school district that ended up having you leave from there.
hmm So the last fall, my school, well, actually, Indiana became a big red for ed target with the teachers unions. And so as I had researched it, I found a lot of disturbing things that, the agenda behind the red for ed. So I actually started a chapter of Purple for Parents Indiana, and we stand for parental rights, protecting children, and just informing people about what's going on in the schools. And I had sent an email to my superintendent and I asked him because at the time they were asking children to wear red for ed. It was a big thing in the school, and I just felt like that's not right. That is a political issue. It should not be used during school, and I felt like they were being used, used in for political gain. And so he had pulled me. This was just shortly after Christmas break. He came in and spoke with me for an hour at the school, telling me that Red for Ed was not political. And he actually called me a far right radical conspiracy theorist. But I handled myself well in the meeting, and I just kind of listened to what he said, and I gave him my side, and we just went our ways. One of the things that Purple for Parents is doing is we have raised a lot of concern about social emotional learning because that's a big issue. And my school had a social emotional learning program called Leader in Me. And while I had posted quite a bit of stuff for my group, bringing awareness to these issues, I had not posted anything that specifically listed the program that my school used until February. I found a article that I think it was a blog post, and I thought that people would think it was very interesting, the concerns that was raised about it. So I posted it on my personal page and in my group. And that was on a Monday. And so then on Friday, which was Valentine's Day, I had a message to come to the office first thing in the morning. And so when I went to the office, they basically told me that I was making them look bad, and they told me that I could either resign or I was going to be fired. And I told them I would not resign because I didn't do anything wrong. I spoke as a private citizen on a matter of public concern in my own time. And so they fired me.
Yeah, wow. It just seems like such a double standard. I mean, it seems like left-wing teachers are allowed to say whatever they want, even on school time, and conservative or even not so left-wing teachers are silenced. In fact, we just did an article recently in our updated second edition of the New American Magazine's special report on rescuing our children about the good public school teachers who are under siege. And last year, I had the opportunity to travel across the country and give talks about what's happening in the school system. And I can't tell you how many hardworking, God-fearing teachers who just love the children were just exasperated with what was happening in the schools. So I know you have a lawsuit going against the district, and I really would like to talk about that. But before we get into that, I want to talk a little bit more on some of what was going on there. You mentioned social and emotional learning, and it's a term that now is obviously, big buzzword we're hearing all over the country and even abroad. The UNESCO is now promoting this when it comes to education. But I think for a lot of people, it's a bit of a mystery. Could you dig into a little bit, what does social and emotional learning mean? What does it look like? Maybe some practical examples of how it works in a classroom, and maybe why parents ought to be so concerned about this.
Sure. So the social emotional learning is on the surface, people don't understand. They think, oh, they're just teaching kids to be kind, but it's really it is to me it's a vehicle. It is Well, they say it's to educate the whole child. Okay, so mind, body, soul. They want to, and it's teach the whole child, and it's also they say it is for a culture change in the school. So once a school adopts this program, it changes everything. When I returned to school this last fall, I was really surprised. Our school had been remodeled. It looked nice, but as you walk through the halls, you notice the same language. It's over and over and over, and it was all this Leader Me, which was our social emotional learning program. Um, the every single day the kids are bombarded with these phrases. There's 7 habits with this particular one, and every morning they're reminded of which one they should work on. Uh, they have they take kids into classrooms, they split them up, and they role play with the children, and teach them things that are should be taught at home about how to handle yourself in situations. And I'll give you an example. So one of the habits that they have is seek first to understand before you are understood. So they are teaching these things to kids as this is how you handle every situation for your life. Now, as adults, we can understand when to apply these type of skills, to compromise and stuff. But they're teaching kids that in any situation you compromise, any situation you should understand where someone else is coming from first. Um, so if a child's being bullied, instead of just taking care of that situation, it's well, you need to understand where they're coming from, and having kids just deal with certain things. Another thing that's kind of big around here is trying to push this inclusive restrooms and locker rooms. So it just social emotional learning is uh, psychologically preparing children to accept anything that they want to push as normal, and it's really all in the name of social justice.
Yeah, thank you for that explanation, Jennifer. It's so good to hear about this from somebody who's kind of been on the front lines and has seen this in my own studies. Looking into this, I think your average American parent still believes that when they send their child off to school, they're just worried about reading, writing, math, history, maybe some civics and some science, not realizing that we're entering this whole new world where academics are kind of being pushed to the side, and we're moving now into this social and emotional realm where they want to condition children to have the attitudes and the beliefs and the views that the government wants them to have. And I think a lot of parents, regardless of where they are on the political spectrum or their religious views, would be a little bit concerned about that, since that's not what we traditionally think of as a school education. Before we get into the lawsuit, I also want to dig in just a little bit more into this red for ed versus and what their political goals are. I know some of the big unions have been huge on this. The National Education Association is, of course, a topic that has concerned me for a very long time. My friend and late colleague, Dr. Samuel Blumenfeld, wrote a whole book about it called NEA Trojan Horse in American Education, where, I mean, some of the stuff he was exposing was just mind blowing. I mean, they were filled, the upper ranks were filled with communists, and they were openly advocating world government, and they were talking about promoting this LGBT stuff even back decades ago. So tell us a little bit about what the Red for Ed is, what the goals are, and then maybe also tell us a little bit about Purple for Parents, and kind of the where you guys see that movement going in terms of parental rights and the well-being of children.
Sure. So Red for Ed, they have everyone believing that it is for the kids. That's what they always say, right? It's for the kids. This is we have to do all of these things for the kids, but it is not about the kids. It is about them getting more money. It's always about money. If you pay attention to what they need, it's always about more money. And then what they do is they use this money because they're also not for the teachers, and they use their political influence to get behind candidates that will push these things into our schools, like the social emotional learning, comprehensive sex ed, anything that they want to push. So they get the teachers by saying, well, you don't make enough, so we've got to strike, and we've got to get out there for more money. But it's really about getting more dues, more fees for them to push their political agenda. And teachers don't know. I found it very interesting as I was researching Red for Ed and the statistics they put out on it's always, well, Indiana is one of the lowest in teacher pay, but if you scroll down and find out where they're getting their statistics, they even admit that they don't take into account cost of living. I mean, that's a huge, right? So, that's a huge factor in that. So people are just really being fooled on the statistics that they're pushing out. So with Purple for Parents Indiana, we are we're combating this. We're trying to actually put out the truth about what is going on. We don't have a problem with good teachers being paid well. We think they should be paid well. But the problem with what they're doing is they're protecting all teachers, and some that aren't really doing what they need to be doing for the children. And not only that, we're trying to inform parents because, like you said, parents, they just don't know. They just don't know. You just assume that the school's doing right. You assume the school is has the best interest out for your children. And one of the problems I think is I said this, I think some of the people think I'm not telling the truth about social emotional learning because I've dug deep into that hole and I understand it better than they do. And the teachers union, Red for Ed, has been really good at covering up things and making them look pretty on the surface.
Yeah, it's so good that you're speaking out on these things, Jennifer, because I think it's really good for parents and fellow teachers to hear this from people who are in the front lines. Actually, a good friend of mine was a public school teacher until very recently, and he saw this too. In fact, he sent me some of the videos that were being required. He was supposed to show it to his first classroom period every single day. I was supposed to show these social and emotional learning videos, and they were aimed at conditioning the children to have a certain view of homosexuality, a certain view of transgenderism. And that he's a Christian that conflicted with his Christian beliefs, and I think that would conflict with the Christian beliefs of most of the members of this community. And yet, this was being pushed into the classroom, and parents just don't know. Now, I want to talk a little bit about your lawsuit too, Jennifer. You are suing them. Tell us a little bit about this. I understand you guys have a very prominent attorney, Mr. James Bopp, who's working on the case. Tell us a little bit about the lawsuit. What are you trying to accomplish with it? What's the status of it? And is there any way people can learn more?
Sure. So we just filed that. We just a week or so ago. So it's very early in the process, but the entire complaint, you can read it all there. I think for me, it is a First Amendment case. And what is so important about this is that teachers should not be afraid to speak out. And my school fired me for bringing legitimate concerns that are all true about a program because they wanted to silence me. And what worries me about it is that so I know there's other teachers at that school that agree with me, but now they're scared to say anything because, look what happened to me. I have messages from some of my students' parents that, Jennifer, thank you for speaking out. I know you were a good teacher and you cared, but they're afraid to say anything because their children are at that school and they don't want their children to be treated any different. So the school has, really just bullied, which is crazy for a school to be doing, and used me as an example for speaking up. And I think this is a very important case because we need people to know that if they say you see something, say something, and I did, and they fired me for it. So I think it's important to protect teachers because we've got to get them to start feeling comfortable with speaking out about what's going on.
Yeah, and before we went on, we talked a little bit about there's another teacher from another state who's actually very very liberal. He supports a lot of the things that maybe some of the viewers of this program might disagree with, but he agrees with you that free speech is important and that teachers' rights and parental rights ought to be protected. Can you talk a little bit about that and maybe this isn't really a partisan issue, right? It's not even about your political views. This should be something that would unite all teachers and all Americans, right?
Yes, I was so excited when my attorney received an email from a teacher in Kentucky, and he made it very clear that politically we probably stand very far apart, and that's okay. But I was thankful because he said he had been fighting the same program for years and actually could prove everything, all of my concerns were legitimate. And he said he was just glad it was having some more attention because it isn't right. It doesn't matter what, like you said, what politics you follow. If you're a person of faith, maybe you're not. None of that is important as far as it doesn't belong in the schools. We need to protect parental rights, and parents get to teach their children what morals and values they want to teach the children, not the school. And so I thought it was very significant that he was willing to stand with me and say this is not an issue on one side. This should be an issue for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, in the last few minutes that we have left, Jennifer, would what would be your message to parents out there, especially parents who might have children in the public school system? And what would be your message to fellow teachers? I know, regardless of the politics, a lot of teachers are unhappy with what's going on. I know because I've talked to huge numbers of them. They're very concerned. We just did an article not long ago about how there's this concerted effort now to really sideline teachers and marginalize them and really just make them into the kind of like facilitators or glorified babysitters, just supervising a classroom full of kids playing on a computer, doing subscription-based study programs. What is your advice for parents out there who are maybe concerned about some of this, and what is your advice for fellow teachers?
So for the teachers, I never was in the teachers union, but they should know they do not have to be in the teachers union. I think that's a big thing, that a friend of mine, Rebecca Friedrichs, fought for that at the Supreme Court level. And I don't even know if some teachers realize that, but they do not have to support this. And I would encourage them to read the NEA's resolutions and find out what your dues are paying for, because they probably do not align with some of your beliefs, which would personally bother me. So I would start there. And for the parents, like I said, parents just generally think that the school is doing the right thing. I think that, it makes it easy for people, but there's a lot of awareness out there, and I think I would start digging into what we're saying. You don't have to take our word for it. The information is out there and you can find it, because they are trying to assume the parental role of your children, and that's scary.
Yeah, no, I couldn't agree more with you, Jennifer. And so, where can people follow you, learn more? How do you have a website, a Facebook page, a social media? What's the best way for people to reach out to you, follow the lawsuit, and all the rest of it?
Sure. So we are working on a web page and everything, but you can find us right now on Facebook. So just do hashtag Purple for Parents Indiana and join our group. And you do not have to be a parent. You do not have to be in Indiana. If you are just someone that's concerned for the country and the innocence of our children, please join us.
Excellent. Well, Jennifer, thank you so much for speaking out. Thank you so much for fighting back against injustices, and thank you very much for being with us. We really appreciate it. Folks out there, you just heard it, straight from somebody who was right in this, somebody who was on the front lines of what's happening. And as she mentioned, don't take her word for it. Don't take my word for it. Don't take our word for it. Go out in there and do your own research. I think what you'll find is going to be very, very troubling to you, regardless of where you fall on the political spectrum, regardless of your beliefs. There's a lot going on that we need to be raising awareness of. So thank you so much for watching. As always, please like, share, subscribe, get this out there, because as you know, YouTube, social media, Facebook, they're trying their best to silence us and disappear us. So we depend on people like you who are watching this to get the information out there. So please share it. Share it with teachers you might know. Share it with parents you might know who have children in the schools. Thanks again for watching, and God bless.